January disease, January disease. What is January disease? Chii chinombonzi January disease. What are the signs of January disease? How do I differentiate January disease from other tick-borne diseases, such as heart water, such as anaplasmosis, such as red water? As a vet, I've heard farmers saying that give your animal chingai kana 7 days, mumba yako inoita right. Ndizvo here. Chii chinombonzi January disease. What are the symptoms of January disease? Inomborapika here January disease. Tinoirapa sei? Tinoipreventa sei January disease kusaitika? Uyai tigokurukura nezvazvo muepisode inotevera. Now we're going to talk about January disease. Is January disease when in January you don't have money for school fees? No, here we're going to talk about January disease, which is disease of cattle. And there are various cases which I've attended to as a vet. I know of a farmer who lost 80% of their herd to this January disease. They had a herd of about 120, so they lost about more than 90 cattle. What causes January disease? January disease is caused by a hemoparasite known as Theileria parva, and this Theileria parva is spread by ticks known as the brown ear ticks. And these brown ear ticks are scientifically known as Rhipicephalus appendiculatus. They are normally resident in the ears and the head of the animal, and they spread this disease known as January disease. And this parasite is the one which is responsible for January disease. And it's known as January disease because during the rainy season, the numbers of these ticks, they pick up in January. Why? Because of the seasonality of ticks. When the conditions are very wet and humid, the ticks will multiply and they would increase. Hence, also the disease which they spread. Now, the causative agent of January disease is known as Theileria parva, which is a hemoparasite which is found in the blood. So this Theileria parva is spread by ticks, the ticks which I talked about, the brown ear ticks, and this Theileria parva is the one which is responsible for spreading the disease. Theileria parva, the causative agent, it's normally endemic. It has got an enzootic stability within populations of buffaloes, and that's why usually most of the time you wouldn't see buffaloes coming down of January disease. But if they come in contact, the buffaloes, if they come in contact with cattle, the cattle are the ones which become affected. So when the ticks jump off from the buffaloes and they bite the cattle, then they become infected. But currently in Southern Africa we have a situation whereby this disease is now very endemic, and you even find January disease even in winter, even in times when you wouldn't expect it to be there, because of these ticks are now widespread and they are now found in places which they are not normally found. So you find out all across Zimbabwe, even in Bulawayo areas like the Lowveld and other areas, you find out the people are crying of this January disease. There are other tick-borne diseases which are spread by ticks. These include heart water, better known as cowdriosis. We also have got babesiosis, also known as red water. Then we also have got gout sickness. So I'll start with the heart water. So the symptoms of these diseases, they are almost the same, whereby we've got elevated temperature, high temperatures. We also have got labored breathing, and the animal does not eat very well, so there is a lack of appetite, and the animal usually lags behind the head. So for all these the other three tick-borne diseases, the clinical signs may be similar. Apart from babesiosis, also known as red water, the animal will be passing on urine with a red tinge. That's another differentiating factor. And then in hard water, the animals will be struggling, like they will have a struggling gait, like as they are walking, as if they are climbing the stairs. So basically these are other tick-borne diseases. They are managed by for hot water, you can manage them using oxytetracyclines, which is your alamycin. Now you suspect that your cattle or your animal has got January disease. How do I know that it has got January disease? There are things which you should check for, which are the signs and symptoms for January disease. And these signs and symptoms for January disease, they include labored breathing, lagging behind the head, loss of appetite, massive, if I say massive, swelling of the lymph nodes. You can actually see them from a distance. For example, the shoulder lymph node, you can actually see it from the distance that is actually swollen. Then there is tear production in the eyes, which can also become cloudy at times. Then there is also nasal discharges by the animal. So these are the major signs and symptoms of January disease. And the catch phrase is the massive swelling of the lymph nodes. You can actually see it. So these are the signs and symptoms for January disease. So what are the signs? Signs are what you see, and the symptoms are what you feel. Of course, the animal will not tell you what they feel. So things like for temperature, you actually take the temperature of the animal. Then things like labored breathing, you can actually see. So signs are what you see, then the symptoms are what you normally feel for the animal, which we normally take temperature, and you can actually see things like labored breathing. So number one, we've got high temperature. So the cattle will have an abnormal temperature. And how do you check the temperature of cattle? So you normally do what is known as a rectal temperature. You take a normal thermometer, which we normally use for humans. Then you make sure that the dung is out of the rectum. You can actually, as a farmer, you know, you can actually use a hand to remove a dung. You can use gloves. Then you insert your thermometer. Then you can actually tell that the temperature is high. Then the animals will also have labored breathing. By labored breathing, I mean to say that there are difficulty in breathing. Why? Because this disease can actually cause accumulation of pleural fluid in the lungs of the animal. So when you normally do a post-mortem of these animals, you will find froth and fluid in their lungs. So that is the cause of the labored breathing. Then another clinical sign is the animals will have massive swelling of the lymph nodes. The lymph nodes will be swollen. You can actually tell from a distance that the lymph nodes are swollen, especially the shoulder lymph nodes. You can tell from a distance. The lymph nodes are part of the lymphatic system, which is part of the body's defense system. So we've got various types of lymph nodes. Some under the jaws, known as the submandibular lymph nodes. We also have got some at the shoulder area, the scapular lymph nodes. So all these, they become swollen. So when you do a post-mortem of the affected animal, you find that the lymph nodes are swollen. There is massive swelling of the lymph nodes. Why? Because it's part of the body's defense system in order to protect the animal from infection. Another symptom is that the animals, they will have cloudy eyes. Why cloudy eyes? Because if you look at the eye, we've got the white part and the black part. So the black part is the one which becomes cloudy because of this infection. So there's cloudiness of the eye. Then there's also what is known as lacrimation, whereby there's excessive tear production. The animals will be producing a lot of tears, as well as salivation. They'll be producing a lot of saliva. So these are the symptoms, the major symptoms for January disease. So in summary, this is a summary of the clinical signs. Number one, there is high temperature, which is caused by this infection. Then 2, we also have got difficulty in breathing, which is caused by fluid accumulation in the lungs. So the animals will be having labored breathing. Then 4, we've got a massive swelling of the lymph nodes. Then number 4, we also have got cloudiness of the eyes. Then number 5, we've got excessive tearing and excessive salivation. Then and at times the animal will also have got aggression. They can actually chase you. There are some cases because this parasite can actually get at times to the brain, so there is aggression. Now we come to the treatment part. How do you manage this disease as a farmer? You are suspecting, you have seen the clinical signs, and you are highly sure that the disease which you are dealing with is January disease. So how do you treat the affected animal? So there are drugs of choice. The drug of choice is known as bupivacaine. So this bupivacaine is the one which will deal with the Theileria parva, which is a hemoparasite. So normally there are 2 treatment options which you can do. You can give bupivacaine on its own, such as drugs such as which has got the trade names Bupavex or Bupaject. You can actually do that. But in this case, it is highly recommended that some farmers, they withhold water for 3 days when they give such drugs. Remember, I said that with the January disease, there is fluid accumulation in the lungs. So in order to prevent this fluid accumulation, it is theoretically suggested that if you withhold water, you prevent the accumulation of fluid in the lungs. So farmers would normally withhold water and with the treatment of this for 3 days. But remember that the hydration status of the animal is very important. So by withholding water, you might also be affecting the chances or the probability of the animal recovering. You are actually lowering the probability of the animal recovering. So there is another treatment option whereby we make use of a combination of bupivacaine and furosemide. Bupivacaine, remember, it deals with the hemoparasite, which is Theileria parva, and furosemide is the one which will deal with the draining of water. So we've got a drug known as Parvexon Plus, which is responsible for draining water. It will deal with the hemoparasite as well as the draining of the water. So there's no need for you to withhold water. So most farmers, they opt to give Parvexon Plus, which is a combination of bupivacaine and furosemide. And farmers, they also go into the extent of giving oxytetracyclines. We find the oxytetracyclines in itates, in alamycin, in limoxin, in cupamycin. All these ones are oxytetracyclines. Why give oxytetracyclines plus bupivacaine? Because in this case, since it's a tick-borne disease, we might also be dealing with other tick-borne disease, such as heart water, gout sickness, as well as red water. So you'd also normally give oxytetracyclines plus the bupivacaine. So for the dipping regimes, what is encouraged by the Department of Veterinary Services is that normally in Zimbabwe, during winter times, we dip our cattle once every 2 weeks. Then during the rainy season, we dip our cattle once every week. But because of the advent of this disease, January disease, the Department of Veterinary Services, under which we take direction as vets, issues directions that we normally dip our cattle using the 5-5-4 method in the event of a disease outbreak for this disease. So what it means is that every 5 days, you dip your animals, then 5-5-4, which is 5 days, then 4 days, and you go along that manner. In that, we are trying to break the life cycle of this tick, so that it does not cause much damage to our animals. As farmers, we have to know that general disease can be prevented and general disease can be managed. So this disease, it can be managed and it can be prevented. How? By the methods which I've talked about, by managing our ticks, by making sure that our cattle are dipped. Mushonga kudibba mombe kudib. I'm sure that as young kids, as we're growing up, we saw that each and every time our fathers or our grandfathers, they made efforts to dip their animals, and we never had these diseases. Now that we've talked about January disease, we now want to talk about dipping. Dipping is a very, very, very important process which we use. It's a method which we use to prevent these tick-borne diseases. So that's why we are putting more emphasis on dipping. Dips, better known as Acaricides, these are chemicals which are used to kill ticks, including mites and other insects. Dips are very important. Why? Because by preventing animals being bitten by ticks, hence you are preventing tick-borne diseases. So there are various groups of acaricides, which include microcyclic lactones. We also have got organophosphates. Then we also have got amidins, like amitraz. These are the various groups of acaricides. We also have got synthetic pyrethroids, such as deltamethrin. Now I'm sure that you have heard about the concept of divareda kushanda, tikatry divarine amitraz kwekuzveda hazvifi, tikatry divarakati ndio rinoshanda. We just want to explain this concept called tick resistance. Tick resistance is a phenomenon which is well known throughout the country, Zimbabwe and the rest of the world. And tick resistance, it's a phenomenon whereby ticks, they become accustomed to the dip so that they will be producing chemicals which act against the dip, to the extent that these ticks, they can actually resist the dip. Even the offspring which are being born by these ticks, produced by these ticks, they will also be resistant to the dips. So there are various ways which we can use to prevent this tick resistance by making sure that we are using dips in the right and corrective way which they are supposed to be used. By doing so, you'll be preventing tick resistance. How do we make use of correct use of acaricides? That's what we really want to talk about. Number one, you make sure that you are using the dose rates which are recommended by the manufacturer. Remember, when the manufacturer, when they manufacture these, they undergo what is known as dip trials. And when they do dip trials, they can establish the right dose at which to use for these ticks. And these trials, called dipping trials, they are approved by the Department of Veterinary Services as well as the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe. So by not following these instructions, maybe you are underdosing or you are overdosing, you are actually creating an environment whereby these ticks can actually adapt to the overdosing. And then when the actual challenge comes and you want to use the correct dose, then it will not work. So let's follow manufacturer's instructions. Then also, farmers should also practice when they are dipping their cattle, they should also practice what is known as sampling of the dip. I know that farmers, they don't have laboratories or other equipment which are used to test these dips, to test for their concentrations. So what you need to do is, when you are using a plunge dip, you need to take what is known as a pre-dipping sample. I will explain later, as well as what is known as a post-dipping sample. A pre-dipping sample is what you take before dipping, after mixing. If it's a plunge dip, there are 20 to 30 animals which are used as mixer animals. When they run through the dip, after you're charging your dip, you take a sample, then you put it in a sample bottle, then you take it to laboratories which test the samples, such as us as Coopers or Center of Veterinary Laboratories. They have got these testing facilities. Then also, after the rest of the animal have dipped, you take what is known as a post-dipping sample. you also take it to the lab. By doing so, you want to know the actual amount of dip which is in each and every sample, so that you know what to charge in the next dipping session which you are going to do. And then I'll also talk of another thing which farmers are doing, which is a bad practice which farmers are doing, the use of agrochemicals as dips. There are various agrochemicals which are used by our farmers for crops such as fenvalerate, fipronil. Then there's also Acaricides for tomatoes. These agrochemical formulations, they are not compatible for their use as dipping chemicals, because they are formulated for crops. They are formulated to survive longer in the environment versus these dipping chemicals which are made. Taking for example, an Acaricides formulation for red spider mites is not the same formulation as Acaricides for dips. Why? Because when you spray your tomatoes, you want when you want to control red spider mites, you want the formulation to thrive more in the environment. Even when the rain comes, you want it to thrive more, so that what is known as stability, the stability of the chemical will be for longer periods of time compared to the stability which might be effective for ticks. Such that the tick, if you use an agro formulation, the tick will be more in contact with this agrochemical formulation, enhancing the chances that there is tick resistance is built more and more, so that when you want to use a formulation which was made for ticks, it might not work because you are using the wrong formulation. Another practice which farmers are now doing is that they can take fenvalerate, then they mix with used oil, then they spray their cattle. Fenvalerate is not approved for use in animals, but we find that some of these chemicals, they end up in the human food chain, so that even if after spraying your animals with that, you find out there might be residues of fenvalerate in meat, in milk, so that these chemicals can be passed on through the human food chain, so that we might end up having resistance even for human medicines. So you see, this issue of resistance, it's not just child's play. It's not that you're just spraying your animals, but you want to protect the humans as well, because you don't want these chemicals to end up in the human food chain, so that next time when you fall sick, then you receive treatment for tuberculosis. It's not working because you're using the wrong chemical when you're spraying your animals. So this is a serious issue, mispractice, malpractice, which is being done by our farmers. So use the right chemicals which are recommended by the authorities, the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe, as well as the Department of Veterinary Services. So there's a case study, a Uganda case study about what farmers are doing malpracticing in dipping, the use of agrochemicals. So as Zimbabwe, we can learn from the Uganda experience. Farmers were using these agrochemicals for dipping their cattle, so that the normal dipping chemicals were no longer working, so that they ended up with massive tick resistance. So we wouldn't want to end up with such in Zimbabwe. Now on counterfeit medicines. Counterfeits, these are falsified medicines which are used. They were known as counterfeit medicines in the previous era, but now they are known as falsified medicines. It is estimated that around 30%, according to WHO, they are falsified medicines. When we make use of these falsified or counterfeit medicines, we are actually promoting tick resistance. To avoid that, we have to buy medicines from reputable suppliers which are on the MCAZ register. Remember, all medicines, human, including veterinary medicines, they are regulated by the Medicines Control Authority of Zimbabwe. So when you enter a pharmacy or a veterinary medicine general dealer or any other agro dealer, you have to check to see if they have got this MCAZ certificate. By having this MCAZ certificate, it really shows that they are making an effort to sell wholesome medicines which are not adulterated or falsified. So you have to buy from reputable dealers in order to avoid this tick resistance.